Hello, everyone. Well, let's begin our lecture 14. I'm going to share the screen as always and start with prayer. Let's pray. So, Father, we thank you for this lecture as we talk about patron as father, sponsor, and partner more in details. Give us insights, Lord, that we may learn, that we may grow. Uh, We, uh, we ask for your favor, Lord, that we would really grasp this truth so that we could apply into our own mission, our own ministry. In Jesus' name. Amen. Well, let lecture 14 begins with Baksu. A bit of review of last lecture 13. We talk about Korean patron as kap, as rice pots by some Cambodian pastors, which was kind of sad, but a bit of a confession that I was probably one of the biggest rice pot called Big Babo rice pot. Babo actually means in Korean stupid. So it kind of started out as a joke. My official or my legal name is Seokwan Oh. My father gave me that name. But in America, a lot of times they cannot pronounce my name, especially by the spelling Sukhwan. They go Sukwan, Sikwan, Sikwan, Sakwan, and so I got tired of it. I decided to just call me Robert, because easy name. There are a lot of Roberts. But Robert in English, in short, is Bob. But as a joke, it became like Bob O. That's my nickname. But Bob O or Pabo means stupid. Bob O is my name, but Pabo is stupid. So in a way, I became biggest Pabo rice pot. What happened was 2006 December, I was at Battambang area and talking to some Cambodian pastors that I familiar with through my teaching and through my, remember the pastors conference that we began with Dr. or Pastor Tang Baek Hong? Yeah, 150 pastors, and a lot of this pastor, I got to know them intimately. And then they said, oh, Pastor O, I have to quit ministry. I said, why? Well, in order to send one child to a college in Cambodia, it takes about $400 to $500 a year tuition. And he said that I have to send 3 kids through college this year. He was very well educated and he spoke quite good English, but he was getting paid at the time $80 a month salary. And he could get a job as a tour guide and make $500 a year, $500 a month. So, but I mean, it was a real issue. How do you send 3 of your kids through college when it will cost $500 per child per year? There'll be $1,500 tuition, but he makes $80 a month, right? He makes less than all the tuition he has to pay. So he was going to quit ministry and join the secular job. And I said, please don't, And so 2007, I spent 29 days traveling through 8,200 miles. That's 13,000 kilo, 14 meetings, and I raised $140,000. And then there's this crazy tour. It became 8 documentaries, CTS, and then I raised $140,000, and we sent a lot of 35 PKs, 4-year college. And then we launched the WOLF, War on Leprosy and Poverty. We raised $300,000, bought the land, bought the school, built the school, and I mean, money we provided. So what is the problem? The problem is that I became a rice pot. And because I did not build it out of relationship, but I built it out of projects. So I visited a lot of places in Kingdom of Cambodia through my Ph.D. research, and I'll be visiting them and interviewing them. And I realized aid dependency was issue. So I have decided, you know what, we need to really learn about this. So I invited Korean researchers from Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, and Phnom Penh, got this nice French resort hotel, And then we start talking and sharing. And you see here, Pastor Tang Baek Hong also, he present his paper in English, and all these scholars, this from Vietnam. And so it was wonderful. And then we published a book, the eight dependency issue of church plants of Indochina from 5 countries. And then we would start inviting people from England, Dr. Bill Privet from Oxford Center for Mission Studies. We start doing a Phnom Penh forum and then discussing and talk. And then we also had a big meetings. We talk about issues and we start publishing. So we launched 8 years ago, Cambodia Research and Resource Center with all these people. And subsequently, everybody got Ph.D. here, 3 of them. And one got master out of our research base. And then I begin to understand that how do you build a relationship so that we do not stay as a babo rice pot? I don't want to be nobody's rice pot. See, I want I and thou relationship. I want to have a personal human relationship, not I and it. That's what Martin Buber said. You know, I and thou is personal, one person to other person relationship, not I and it. Because the modern world loves to dehumanize a person and turn it into a number, turn it into a tool for my gain. So I said, how do we do that? And it comes out of my own research. And I found out this tripartite role of TED and CBC pastors. The CBC, Cambodia Bible College, which is nice real name, went through the 3 distinctive phases. I observed that the role that TED and the CBC pastors played actually changed according to each distinctive stage. First, during the mission house stage, 1998 to 2003, TED played the role of a father, and CBC pastor played the role of children. Okay. First, during 1980s, Spivos was not formally organization, but consists of community of Ted's family as 7 boys, all living in Ted's flat. So in one house, 7 boys lived, and he also had 2 boys. No, Ted had 3 boys also. So you got 10 boys living in community. However, eventually by renting a large flat with several rooms, the mission house phase of the CBC began, accommodating around 20 Cambodian young people who lived and studied in Bible together daily. Most of these 20 Cambodians became pastors and part of the CBC church planting efforts. So it's just, if you think about it, it's not even planned or strategized. It was just happened to gather all the orphan-like kids, some of them are literally from the street, and train them, feed them, house them, and start learning Bibles together. And he becomes a father, right? I mean, if someone house you, feed you, clothe you, pay for your education, what's the role of a father? That's what fathers do. And so Mission House stage, 1998 to 2002, that's where Ted played the role as a father. And this come out of the qualitative research. Qualitative research, of course, is qualitative. It's not quantitative. So a lot of interviews and a lot of transcription of your interviews, because I both did English interview and Korean interview. And I transcribed all the Korean interview, and I had to spend several $1,000s to hire someone to actually transcribe verbatim, word by word. And also I hired a Korean Khmer staff to translate all the English interview into English or written transcription. See, if I had the means of YouTube these days, that when you record it through YouTube, present it through YouTube, transcription is automatic. Well, I didn't have that technology then. So out of the transcription, I begin to isolate cases where they start talking about Ted as spiritual father, parents, father, 아버지, 부모, 영의 아버지, like that. And then I start, well, wait a minute. How come they're referring to Ted as a spiritual father, right? That's a key finding. So although social studies currently express patron-client dynamics primarily in the material and political terms, in case between founder of CBC pastors, TED and pastors, in relational asset, patron as father was observed. This is a key breakthrough. And this came through for me to put it on the wall. And then it was an effort to make OC Bach. What is OC Bach? Once again, original contribution of body of knowledge. That's what we're going for, whether PhD or master thesis. What are you saying originally? If everybody, you're just repeating after what everybody said, then just write a book or just don't do thesis, because thesis is an argument. You're trying to make an argument. You're trying to say something new or different with the backup of the data. That's all there is. So all in the discourse of the A dependency issue, traditionally they blamed client and no one blamed patron. They said, well, clients are A dependent. What is the issue with ul? Ul is A dependent. They are beggars, they are poor, and they're not going to be independent. Well, in that dialogue, that academic discourse, I bring in this element of no, in case of TED and CBC, so it's not, I'm not generalizing. In the case of TED and CBC, at least TED at the beginning stage played the role of a father. Is this correct observation? Is church planting by any U or CPTI different? If so, how and why? Now, yeah, instead of saying that I disagree with you because I don't like you, you have to say, well, it's not like that in Philippines. Well, it's not like that in Vietnam. It's not like that, in my denomination. Talk to me. Please send me your different opinion, because I would like to really, really incorporate into my teaching. So the first phase was patron as father. It was very obvious. And then came the second phase from 2003 to 2007, which CBC became formal Bible school, primarily resulting from an increase in number of students and need for more formal teaching. TED bought a large piece of land sponsored by one Singaporean church, his patron, of the outskirts of the city, and start building a dormitory and classrooms. By personal referrals of the mission house phase, students and other Korean missionaries, the student body grew to be more than 100. Classes were more organized. Bible teachers from Singapore, Korea, Philippines, and other neighboring countries came to teach there, including the Nagaland, which is fantastic. So what happened? That the community of 10 now becomes community of 100 at early CBC stage. It's not really called Bible college yet, but I mean, when you have 100 people, you got to call it something. And so you have to start building. And now it's growing, and he doesn't really, you can never be a father to 100. So now his role slowly shifts from a father to a sponsor. I'm talking about TED. Finally, during 2008-2015 period, third and the final stage of CBC, all of the mission house students and some of those who had helped formalize CBC graduate from CBC and start planting CBC churches. So officially, once these kids live with them, some of them 10 years, now go through this 3-4 year Bible college school curriculum, they get graduate and they meet their partner in school, married, and now TED start getting money from Korea, sponsor, and then it's very simple. It's not complex. Ask Korean churches, hey, this couple wants to plant a church, and they need $150 a month support. Would you support them? Of course, it's easy. 150 is nothing to Korean churches in Korea. So, we'd love to support. So now one church was planted, and then, a couple years later, this, couple now has 50, 60 people, but they have no building. Is it possible for you to come up with $20,000 so we could build the building? So that's what they did. So natural progression. So now TED really playing this role of a sponsor. He's sponsoring this, sponsoring him, sponsoring that. In the meantime, next groups of entering freshmen studied together on large campus with several students' dormitory, classrooms, and 2 open-air auditoriums to seat several hundred students. According to Sidell Silverman, there is a historical and cultural relationship between the position of the patron and the client, which stems from deep-seated relationship of inequality that becomes brokerage opportunities. In the case of CBC, the Silverman argues that relationship of inequality exists during the mission house stage where Ted played the role of father and CBC pastors' children. However, unlike Silverman's view, this inequality is not necessarily a negative dynamic, but a natural one between Ted and CBC pastors. Robert Penh, 1971, attempt to move beyond the model of brokerage based on inequality, such as that outlined by Silverman, to one that considers the nature of transaction as a starting point of the different roles. According to John Lindquist, Penh attempt to develop a theory of patronage brokerage that focus on role rather than status based on inequality. He argues that roles were situational, that brokerage should be understood as the regulation of the circulation of values. Wow. Likewise, Ted's role as a father was situational and should not be viewed as position-based inequality. So, same scenario, same dynamic happening between Ted and the Cambodian children or students. One view as negative, saying that Silverman says that that is positional abuse, whereas Robert Penh saying that no, it's not abuse per se, but it's situational, it will change. And then it's viewed from position-based, it should not be viewed from position-based. It's a different way of looking at it. Of course, I look at from Lindquist's view, Johann Lindquist. And that's why I came up with the theory, so like Lindquist, it is situational. When situation change, what situation leaders is that when situation change, the leadership has to change. The leader who played like a father when there was only 10 living under his roof, of course, he's just naturally father. Well, how do you father 100 children, right? So then you move on from being a sponsor. So father to children. Lindquist argues that historians influenced by trained anthropology has considered brokers as starting point. Remember the first order broker? So now I'm just reading a whole bunch of literature and finding that they're in agreement. During the first stage, Ted played the role of father instead of a broker while he lived with 7 Cambodian teenage boys at his flat. It was close community that functioned more like family than an academic institution. Ted shared in his interview, I spent 3 to 4 years with these guys in the beginning, eating together more like a family than a school. Some guys came at age 16 and 17, and since they could not graduate in 3 years, we lived together for 4 or sometimes 4.5 years. We became very close, and in a sense, we built lots of chung. Chung is a term that cannot be translated into English. It's ethos, it's giving of self. The Korean term jung is translated as affection or attachment, which describes an intimate relationship between family members or close friends and lovers. So Ted start giving chung to these kids, and these kids start giving chung back. So it's not institutional, it's not social contract based, it's chung based. It became a family. Matter of fact, one of the students who later becomes CEO of a huge NGO from Germany, he says that I was outcast. He was thrown out of his family. So he was orphaned almost. I mean, he had parents, but they will not see him. He was thrown out on the street. And Ted accepts him as his own son, raises him, educates him. And now he's representing, he sent him through Bible college in Singapore. And he's a master's degree in English. So, he becomes national leader. And now the NGO from Germany hired him, and he's making a lot of money. And then he's talk about Ted as someone so endeared to him, like a father, right? So I argue that the case of CBC Church Planting Project, Ted as a broker took the role of father temporarily during the mission house stage. He played a critical function connecting both patron and client, and both his patron and client accept him as such. When functioning as a father, Ted's actions were not necessarily or primarily based on hierarchy or inequality, but on the temporary needs of the situation for which was not regular. regulator and circulator of certain values. Example, financial and mission-related goals. Boy. So, do you agree? Because I could have misread the dynamic, but my observation and interviewing every of the 10 students who became pastors, and I would visit them, different locations, and interview them. And the kind of passion, kind of affection they had toward Ted was unbelievable. It was very personal, very intimate. I mean, some of them really, really loved Ted as his own father. So when we talk about, Korean leadership is built on hierarchy, but then you cannot really say that about, let's say, a family in Korea and ask the son, do you get offended by your father's hierarchical leadership in your home? It's my father. Of course, he's asymmetrical, but he should be above me culturally too. But see, the Western sociologists always look down and come down strong on anything hierarchical, as if their biggest enemy is hierarchical system. And I understand there's a value in egalitarian structure and we are all equal. I understand that we all matter to God equally. Yeah. But the social structure, father and son relationship being hierarchical is a present evil. It is situational. It's something that needed because the child is dependent. The child needs to be provided, be fed, be housed, roof over their head. And to say otherwise would be oxymoron. Recalling his experience during the mission house stage, one Cambodian leader described the role Ted played like this. If we do not have patience, the giving heart and love for God, living together would be so difficult. For me, Reverend Ted, I could say he's like a spiritual father. Someone who lived through the CBC missional stage explained, for me, Ted is my best teacher and also to teach me everything. Yes, he helped me to know God and he's like my real father. So here I have to explain. He says he's the teacher, the group. The teacher, and based on my research, is more intimate term than pastor. So the Cambodian people, if you are called by them as the group, the teacher, you're being much more intimate leader than a pastor. It's not issue with right and wrong. It's just how they proceed. So that's why this kid who grew up in his house said, well, he's my group, but also he's my father. One of the Cambodian staff who joined CBC at the early stage expressed the role of father Ted played in her life, stating, because at the time I was very young, some teachers didn't want to take me in, but Reverend Ted, he is really kind and he still gives me the chance to learn English at CBC. So this gal came when she was like 12, 13. And of course, the Bible college said she's too young, would not accept her. But she's a local girl. She has no possibility of learning education, especially English. And so they rejected, said, no, she's too young. But Pastor Tess said, no, let's give her a try. Let she live here. Because what other option does she have? She has no education system there. And then she lives there extra 3-4 years and then entered the CBC, and then actually marries the pastor, marries the minister there and becomes a beautiful couple. Great testimony. Finally, in the third stage, Ted attempted to transition from the role as a FOB to the role of partner. First order broker sponsor now has shifted from partner. Relevant to this topic, Silverman, in her historical account of Central Italy, show how certain patrons came to dominate a wide range of mediating functions between rural communities. After World War II, many of these functions were taken over the state, and expansion of literacy, education allowed for locals to engage directly with bureaucracy. In the context of the CBC, Ted's role as a broker emerged in its early stage of development, and at this point, his goal was to transition from FOB to role of a partner. So he was a father, now becomes a sponsor. Now he has to become a partner. Now this is a part that Ted himself says that I'm not ready, and he did not even plan on it. So it becomes a huge challenge right now. However, some CBC graduates expressed their frustration as Ted's role as a partner, pointing out that his micromanagement and unwillingness to share the responsibility in making decisions for CBC. Several CBC pastors spoke openly against some of other Korean missionaries as being manipulative, saying their primary commitment was to maximize their gain. Those CBC pastors deemed them unworthy. According to linguists, if manipulation rather than the resolution of conflict was the center of broker's skill, it was not surprising that he was often despised and considered dishonest. The research data shows that Ted and CBC pastors have many hurdles to overcome to become equal partner. This is a 15-year-old church and the history now. The pastors who was a teenager now entering their 40s, wanting to become on their own. Now there's a power struggle. Ted expressed that he had attempted to become a partner with certain CBC pastors and succeeded in a few cases. However, I found out that those pastors had different understanding of what partnership should look like. Ted stated, the talk of partnership is recent thing since we did not even have the concept of partnership at the beginning. Eventually, Ted realized that he had to go toward a partnership model because there was too much financial burden on me to continue. After a certain period, they had to learn to run the church independently. At the same time, he felt that generally most CBC church were immature, and even my patron advised me to be cautious with partnership. Now, this is a struggle. How can you control? And it's the issue with control. If you control because you give them pay salary, well, that's okay. You could control it. But if it's voluntary and they don't get paid, then how do you control it? So from a patron's perspective, it is easier to make your client aid dependent because you could control. If they're not aid dependent and they're self-sustainable, they don't have to listen to you. So the whole wanting to be in partnership sometimes, without even knowing, gets discouraged by patron world. They said, oh, don't hook them up, make them dependent, because that's the easiest ways to control. Because they control the number, control the report. I know, it sounds harsh, but that's the reality. Ted claimed that few CBC church were in partnership with him personally and with CBC as an organization. This church in this location is like our partner. But the pastor from that church said, for me, if we want to work like partner with Ted, and we are thinking in the future that we want to serve at our church, so with our people, we just prepare already. Everyone wants independent church. In the context of other statement he made, he believed that his church has to become independent first before he or it can form a true partnership. So even the Cambodian leaders, young leaders are saying, well, how can I be partner with him if I'm taking money from him? So that's a great, a mature view. This young pastor, he's ready to be partner because he said, until I become financially independent, I will not even seek partnership. Is this correct observation? Is Cambodia Presbyterian Theological Institute Church planting different? So I'm challenging it. What about you? So instead of CPTI, put your situation, put your church name, put your mission agency name. Is your mission agency, is your mission work involved with any kind of church plan? Well, how is it different? How is it different? Share with us, talk to me, email me, and then we'll incorporate into next teaching. Well, it's getting really interesting. Patron as father, sponsor, and partnership. Maybe if you have question, if it's not clear, well, read the book first, and then email me with your question. Okay, I'll see you at the next lecture then. Bye.